Welcome back to another episode of Life in the Stands podcast. We have Jake and Zach on the podcast today. We're really excited to jump into the Cat trade. I think it surprised everyone a little bit. Karl Anthony-Towns getting traded to New York. We're also going to talk a little bit about the MLB playoffs going on, and we have a player of the week for you again. Before we jump into all of that, I want to thank everyone for watching and listening. Remember to like and subscribe and let us know what content you'd like to see in the future as well. With that, Bender, I'm going to let you kind of just take off and run with this. Again, I think everyone was a little bit surprised at this trade, but it was Karl Anthony Towns, basically for Dante DiVincenzo and Julius Randle from the Knicks. And then there was a third team involved that kind of had some ancillary stuff, some extra stuff going on, but that was kind of, a moot point. So really that's the crux of the trade. Dante DiVincenzo, Julius Randle for Karl Anthony Towns. Take it away, Bender.
Yeah, so I'm going to go team by team. I'm going to start with the Timberwolves first because I feel like that's where the least impact is. I feel like people are going to say they did worse in that trade or got worse in that trade. I'm going to go the other route after I had time to think about it. I think Rudy Gobert is only a 20, 25 minute a game player anyway. So I think that final lineup of Naz Reid being the center spot with Julius Randle next to him, I think is a better fit. Um, just because Julius Randle and Gobert are not exactly spacers. Anthony Edwards is not exactly a spacer either. He's a shot creator, but he's not a three-point guy specifically. So I think that team is struggling with spacing but can make it work if they decide to send Rudy Gobert elsewhere or to the bench. Um, Now, I'm happy that Julius Randle finally got a new start, but at the same time, it's kind of smart of the Knicks to trade Randle, considering they played without him last year and did so well, showing he does have value, but you don't need him. You can get extra value for it. Center spot was a weak spot. They got Cat. Now, when the trade first happened, and it's still the way I feel now, Cat being on the Knicks fits exactly what they want to do, and it's scary. Um, Jalen Brunson is mid-range and in, working off a pick and roll, being a little cheeser like a Trey Young type, trying to draw fouls. It is what it is. It's how the refs call the game. But that means on the perimeter, it's nothing but three-point shooters. Now, instead of a dump-off option in Hartenstein or Mitchell Robinson, or even Precious Achua for that matter, um, you finally have a legit three-point shooting threat at the center spot. And Cat's like a 40% from the line, like from the three-point line, career shooter. So like that dynamic just got even more complicated without even talking about Josh Hart being a top five rebounding guard in the league, if not the best rebounding guard in the league. Jalen Brunson, top five point guard in the league or guard in the league in general. Cat's the best shooting big guy in the league, in my opinion. And then you still have OG, who they traded for last year. They have Michael Bridges, who they traded for this year. And the kicker with this, and I'll let you have it, the kicker with this is that they are not done. They're just not done. There was a rumor right after that saying they were going to try and trade Mitchell Robinson, and they're looking to try and get a guy like Trey Murphy. Now, if you guys don't know anything about Trey Murphy, he's probably one of the best perimeter players in the game defensively, and he's a three-point threat. I don't know how many more three-point threats you need on that team for it to be enough. I guess it's not enough for that team. And Jalen Brunson, the team is officially built around him now.
Yeah. Those are all good points to make. I mean, it's also officially an arms race in the East.
Yeah.
Knicks, Celtics, Sixers, even with PG there now. Like, feels like the Bucks are almost behind with a duo of Giannis and Dame. Like, that's crazy. But yeah, we'll keep the conversation focused on the Knicks here, and I guess the Timberwolves. I think people are downplaying and forgetting Dante DiVincenzo in this trade. I think he's a way bigger piece to this than anybody's giving him credit for. And he may not be as far in as like the Nova Knicks kind of thing. But if you're looking at the Knicks roster construction from last year, they had a lot of injuries, and DiVincenzo and Josh Hart were the ones that brought him through it. And I think it was because DiVincenzo shot crazy from three. He was one of the best volume 3-point shooters, as well as being a great perimeter defender. Like those kind of glue guys, like maybe Mikal Bridges comes in and fills that role the same way, but they're just not the same player in that way. Like they're not the same player. So like not that it won't fit, but it's gonna be different. It's gonna be really different. And I think people are like, I'm not hearing enough talk about DiVincenzo in this trade. Like he was their third best player in the playoffs last year. It was
Probably. Yeah.
Brunson, Hart, and then him, and then maybe Hartenstein fourth. But he's your third or fourth best player. Obviously the like, trading Julius Randle away makes sense because you didn't even need him last year. Like that part I totally get. But man, like I would have much rather seen like Miles McBride go in that trade. DiVincenzo hurts, and I think he's going to be a great fit. Money, okay, so that's another big thing, and that also was the Wolves situation. So that's kind of interesting too. Maybe the Wolves aren't done. Um, you mentioned Gobert and that kind of stuff, but I think DiVincenzo is going to make a huge impact on the Wolves. I think they almost make that trade more so for that wing depth versus Randall.
I think DiVincenzo is a very good mentor for Rob Dillingham as well, who I have high expectations for. Especially if you guys
Great
go
point.
back to our draft recaps.
Great point.
Yeah. I think DiVincenzo came off the bench majority of his career, especially in Milwaukee. Um, I think he can kind of like mentor Dillingham, but maybe not be the permanent option there. Like, I see DiVincenzo being a guy that hops around the league just because of who he is. Um, but I'd like to ask you something because what I think about when you were talking about the difference between DiVincenzo and Mikal Bridges, right? Mikal Bridges brings length. So if you think about the starting lineup, and I don't know how they're going to do it, but I think it's going to be what Brunson, Hart, Bridges, OG, Cat. That's kind of how I'm looking at it.
Yep, that's fair.
Bridges being in that lineup matches best with what team? Celtics.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, just
Celtics.
more wings. Yeah.
You need the wing depth. You need the wing defense. You need the wing length for Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. Josh Hart can compete with Derek White. They're basically a similar player, except Josh Hart is crazier on the boards. Derek White's defense is maybe a little bit better. Um, you can pick apart any differences you want, obviously, but in general terms, that is the best matchup for that team. And I just don't know where I'm at with it at this point. But do you think the Knicks or the Sixers are the best matchup for the Celtics in the East right now?
Mm. Ooh. Right now, it feels like the Sixers have more depth, actually, even at that
Oh,
wing spot. Um,
let's say theoretically the Knicks get Trey Murphy. Does that change your opinion?
yeah, that might put him over the edge. It at least brings it even. Because I mean, you look at obviously you look at like starting fives, right? You're gonna have Paul George, Kelly Oubre probably as that wing length kind of depth matching up with the Jalen Brown, Jason Tatum's, and then you have Maxey, you have Embiid, um,
Martin's probably going to get the fifth spot.
right? You have Caleb Martin still, who's like a Celtics killer, right? And then you also signed the guard, the kind of forward from France that played really well in the Olympics. Um,
Yeah.
I forgot about Caleb Martin. Like I mean, that's a huge
Yeah,
deal,
it's
right?
Yabusele, you got Eric Gordon, you got the rookies there, McCain and oh, I can't think of his name right now.
Yeah, the big guy though.
Bona.
Yeah, Bona, Adem Bona. So yeah, I mean, like that's a deep wing team. And if I look at the Knicks, I see Mikal Bridges, I see OG, and then who do you bring off the bench? I mean, I guess it doesn't matter with Tom Thibodeau because that starting five is going to play 40 plus minutes. But
That's why it's interesting to think about because the Knicks aren't done yet. So if the Knicks get Trey Murphy, let's say Josh Hart's in the starting lineup with Brunson, Bridges, OG, and Cat. You're bringing off Trey Murphy, McBride, um, the one Morris brothers there. Achua's still there. I know I'm missing some people. I'll look into that right now, but I still think there's still a
but
lot of depth there, in my opinion,
but
even
let's
without the
say
Murphy.
so. Let me flip this conversation back on its head though, and let me ask you a question. If they have to get rid of Mitchell Robinson for a guy like Trey Murphy, aren't you worried about their rim protection when it all comes down to it? Because Cat's now their best rim protector,
I
and
would
I
say
don't really
no
trust that.
because I would say no because they played small ball last year. When Hartenstein got into foul trouble, they automatically just slid OG to the five spot. OG plays pretty good interior defense for that team. Now, then you'd have to look at what, like Embiid going after OG, right?
Well, even against the Celtics, like Kristaps is a monster on the boards. It's a little different to put OG up against a guy like Miles Turner or even like some of the rotation guys that the Pacers had to. I don't know.
I don't know. To me, I think the Knicks have enough, especially after looking at some guys that we missed. Um, Landry Shamet landed on that team. High end 3-point shooter.
Yeah.
Campaign landed on that team. That gives them a backup point guard and a scoring option. He kind of plays like a shiftier version of Jalen Brunson, like a more impatient version of Jalen Brunson.
Yeah.
So that's interesting to look at. Tyler Kolek, who was their draft pick, played really well in the G League. If he ends up transforming into anything off that
Yeah.
bench, like
Those are
there's
all
so many
smaller guys though
options.
too that you're mentioning.
Bates Diop, who played for the Spurs for a while, is a pretty solid option. He's more of a stat sheet guy. I
Yeah.
don't think he'll get playing time just because he can't really shoot as well as some others. But um, the other thing I look at, you were talking about injuries. Tibbs is going to play those guys. There's
They're
no
gonna play.
resting for those guys.
Yeah. They're
Um,
gonna play.
o OG injury history. Josh Hart's going to play. Jalen Brunson injury history. Bridges is going to play. Bridges
Cattle,
didn't miss a game until last year.
yeah, Cattle play too, but he's not gonna like playing 45 minutes.
No,
He won't be
that's where you
able.
definitely need the depth, which Achua is going to play.
Yeah.
But no, I think it's something to look at. They still have Jericho Sims, but he won't get a lot of playing time because he can't stretch the floor. At least Achua is a small ball center that can shoot a little bit for them.
Right. That
Um,
threat is
and-
there.
yeah, and if they want to get used to playing with Cat, you might as well play Achua as your backup center. That's the next closest thing, right? So
Yep.
um, between him and Sims are your options. I'm not saying Achua is anywhere close to Cat, so don't get that construed a little bit. But let's flip to the Timberwolves side. I know you said about forgetting about DiVincenzo, but how do you think Randall fits with that team?
I mean, I like what you said before about kind of the lineup with Gobert and just like the spacing issues. I mean, Randall would be great as a small ball center too, especially if you have Nas Reed there, because I don't think Nas Reed wants to bang in the paint, but he still gives you some of that rebounding and some of that length and height. Um, so I feel like the combination of Randall and Reed to close games with a DiVincenzo, Anthony Edwards, Mike Conley kind of thing, like that's a smart, athletic, well-rounded five to close a game for you. And then situationally, you have the Rob Dillinghams, you have the Terrence Shannon Juniors, you have um, the Rudy Goberts, and I'm sure we're missing people on that team too. They definitely have more wing depth that you're probably looking at now. You can throw some names out.
Alexander Walker.
Yeah. So I mean I like the Timberwolves a lot. I am curious to see how Julius Randle plays, just because I feel like his play style really changed in New York because he was the guy, and that like changed what he was allowed to do, what he allowed himself to do. So I'm curious, like going to the Timberwolves, he is most definitely not the number one guy. Ant is number one there for sure. And even with Brunson, it seemed like he kind of struggled being a Robin, right? So I'm curious to see how that dynamic shapes out more than like the basketball sense of it. Like
But
how does the relationship dynamic work?
but they are going to need him.
Yeah,
So that's where like last year the Timberwolves needed Cat. He didn't do a whole lot in that last playoff series. That's why they lost. If Julius Randle comes out and starts struggling, it doesn't matter what Anthony Edwards does. They're going to come out and lose again.
yeah,
Um, so you do need the Robin. I don't care who's who. We're all going to sit around and say it's Anthony Edwards' team. Julius Randle will have to learn how to play as the second option, but I think they can figure that out. I don't think that's a problem. I really just think it's where does he get his opportunities at? Because Cat was getting like what, like 6 3-point shots a game, probably at
right,
least.
right.
Um,
So does
just
Randall
based off,
become a more volume 3-point shooter? Like
and
nothing
that's not what he is. But
but
that's what I'm
nothing
saying.
good.
Nas Reed is the better option for that spot instead of
Right.
Rudy Gobert because of how well he was shooting last year. Then Randall can still have his interior like post up, mid post
Right.
opportunities.
But then you don't get the rim protection that you were getting though with
No,
kind of a lineup. It is it's interesting. I feel like both teams have a case that they could make that they won the trade, and both like this is a pretty even one. I don't think we're really gonna know until we get into the season and we start to see how this all gels with both squads.
yeah, and I'm gonna say before we wrap it up here, unless you have anything else to add, I think the Knicks are gonna have time that they need to gel, but I don't think it'll take long because of the style that they play. The kick out threes off of Brunson's like movement, that's gonna be what it is.
Yeah.
What I'm more curious to see is how the Timberwolves figure out that situation. Like we're talking about lineups and stuff. I think the coaching is going to be put to the test next year.
Yeah, definitely. It is a tougher fit on the Timberwolves side. But yeah, with that, let's move into our MLB conversation. The playoffs have officially begun. So let's talk about what we think is going to happen for the rest of the playoffs. And I'll let you kick that off as well.
That works for me because it's not going to take me long. Uh, not as long as the cap conversation. I know I rambled like a you know what, but as a Sixers fan, that pissed me off a little bit. Um, Bottom line, Phillies and Dodgers, that series is just brewing at this point. Like I think that's the automatic National League Conference like finals matchup.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's what everybody's waiting for. Now, I said at the beginning of the year, we're gonna have Yankees Phillies in the World Series, and I'm continuing with that thought. Um, Astros got swept today, um, or yesterday. So there's a bunch of like teams that are usually in it that are getting knocked off. The Orioles are looking like they're struggling. That was a hot team at the beginning of the year. Um, my thought on the American League side, the Guardians also have a bye week. That is the only team that I'm curious about. Now, any four teams that have the bye week can have the same issues. I just feel like the American League is a little bit more up in the air. At least in the National League, you're talking about Phillies and Dodgers, and I don't think anybody's talking about anybody else. So my opinion with this is more whoever comes out of the wild card series, right? I think they're going to have the momentum and have the rhythm going into the next series to play the Guardians. Sometimes it's hard to get your rhythm back when you've had a bye.
Mhm.
Um, that's why the Phillies today specifically had like a backyard baseball game, like just scrimmaging against each other, because you need to find something to do in that downtime.
Yeah.
Not saying they're not doing it. I just don't think they'll pick up where they left off. Um, Yankees, too much firepower, but I think they are going to run into some of the big guns, whether it's the Dodgers or the Phillies, and the Phillies will beat the Yankees in the World Series. One last thing I would like to add that will be a headline. Um, I want to see if Otani pitches because he hasn't pitched all year. And there's rumors that he's allowed to pitch potentially in the playoffs. So whether he comes out of the bullpen or whatever it is, I think that will be a game changer for them.
That will be a game changer. That's something though that could also throw off the rhythm of a team if you haven't done it all year and now you're trying to throw a guy in there too. But yeah, I mean, good predictions there. You're a homer for sure though. And um, with that though, I mean, I agree. I think people are talking Phillies Dodgers on one side of the bracket, right? And I think it's the Yankees to win on the other side. I don't feel like the Guardians, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but they also haven't been a super consistent playoff team.
No,
So to be in that situation, they're not used to that. They're not used to that week off. And just like any bye week in any professional sports league, if you win an NBA series in 4 games and the other series goes to 7 and you have that week off, or if you have the bye week in the first round of the playoffs in the NFL, like it's always a question, what team's going to come out and still be okay. But I think it's a decent bet to place your money on the least experienced team in that situation being the ones to come out flat. So then if you're looking at, basically Yankees from that side of the bracket, and then like you said, it's Phillies or Dodgers from the other side, you could almost flip a coin, on that side. I'll be a homer too, though, and say Phillies. I do think, a Phillies Yankees World Series is also just so iconic. It's hard to not root for that in some ways because you're like that's the kind of stuff like grips the nation. It's almost like what would happen if there was a Pennsylvania Super Bowl, right? Like a
yeah,
Steelers Eagles Super Bowl. It's just like everybody's going to be hype about a Phillies Yankees World Series. So that would be really exciting. And I will say though that the Yankees would win it all. Just feels like it's been a little bit too long since they've won a World Series
they
from a
need to do
home
something.
standpoint. They need to do something, yeah, or
Yeah,
things might change in New York for all we know. But
yeah.
they've spent a lot of money, so
Talking about all the lights and everything, it doesn't matter who's in the World Series as long as the Yankees come out of the other end and Dodgers or Phillies come out of this end. Because you talk about Red October and you're talking about New York and you're talking about LA. So
right.
there's a lot to be had in this series. But
Yeah,
yeah,
Stephen A. Smith will be happy. Gets to be in fun cities. But we're going to end here with a player of the week, and you mentioned the Astros getting swept. Ibanez, Andy Ibanez, hit a clutch triple. I'm not sure it was a double or a triple. I think it was a double, but he brought in 3 runs. It was a 3-run shot in the 8th inning to essentially sweep the Astros there. So it's the first time I think I saw. I think it was like 6 or 7 years that the Astros have not been into the next round of the playoffs there. So really big win for the Detroit Tigers. Congrats to them. We'll see how the rest of the MLB playoffs shake out. Want to thank everyone again for watching and listening. Remember to like and subscribe on whatever platform you're on, and we'll see you on the next episode.